Hey, it's me, Nalazar, and welcome to another Magic Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my Mythic chase cards from the upcoming Outlaws of Thunder Junction set. So, let's get into it. I'm going to once again be grading all these cards from a score from 0 to 10 to how chase-worthy I think they are. Obviously, since this is my chase list, nothing's going to be a 0. But nonetheless, I wanted to throw that out there just so that you would know how I'm going over these cards and grading them. The first of the Mythics on my list is Bristly Bill, Spine Sour. So this is a 12 mana 2/2. It's legendary. It's a plant druid. And has when this creature enters the battlefield or is reinforced, all creatures you control get a +2/+2 buff. Then landfall, so anytime you make a match of 4 or more gems, reinforce each creature you control 1 time. That reinforcement is permanent. That reinforcement will also reinforce Bristly Bill, which means that it will then buff all of your creatures with the +2/+2. Now, this card is on my chase list for a number of reasons. This card is going to be very powerful with our good friend Galta. Galta is going to enter the battlefield, convert 15 gems to green, and is absolutely going to be triggering at least 1 landfall. That landfall is then going to cause Bristly Bill to make it so that Galta gets reinforced once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, depends on the cascade, but definitely is going to get reinforced a bunch, and then it's also going to be empowering all of your creatures. So right there, you can throw it with a very meta card and have an incredibly powerful duo. There's another new card from the upcoming set. I'm going to be highlighting that in another video, but basically there's one of the mounts that is going to double buffs and is going to trigger extra reinforcements and do some really cool stuff. And so those two are going to be very powerful together. I'm trying to generally go ahead and showcase some of the cards on the screen that I'm talking about if they're not on the screen, meaning that if I'm pairing something. But in this case, it's going to be the subject of another video. So rest assured, I will be going over that more in depth. The non-Galta one, the new mount one. But nonetheless, Bristly Bill just seems like a really, really useful card. You can also run this with the Puzzle Masters green land, the Colony Garden, and Seed Gems, because you're going to be converting a whole bunch of gems. You could run this with the Blossoming Tortoise as well. And then you're going to just be reinforcing the Tortoise and the Elementals and Bristly Bill and getting a ridiculous amount of buffs to all of them. And it just seems like it goes perfectly with so many of the cards that are already meta cards that this card looks really fun and really good to me. Do I think it'll be better than Atraxa? No. But I do think that it's going to be very good. So for me, this card is a 7 out of 10. I very much want it. It could wind up being a little bit better than I expect. It could wind up being a little bit worse than I expect. But on the whole, I think I've got a pretty reasonable idea for how powerful this card will be, and it will have the potential to be quite powerful. Next up on my list is Bovine Intervention. This is a card that Gaussmaster spoiled on his channel. If you want to see his thoughts on it, you can go to his channel and check out his spoiler for Bovine Intervention. This is a 20 mana spell. You're going to destroy all creatures, all gems, and then create X white Ox tokens. Those Ox tokens are going to be 2/2 tokens, where X is going to be the number of cards destroyed this way, including their reinforcements. Then you're going to gain Y life. Y is the number of Ox creatures you control, including their reinforcements. Finally, all players lose the crime emblem. So there's a lot of things that I really like about this card. First and foremost, I love board wipe cards. I run them always in events because I always want to have protection, be it removing my creatures in the event that I ramp up too fast so that I can still beat my opponent and get all my objectives, or on the flip side, my opponent ramps too fast and I don't want to lose the game, so I want to wipe the board. Bovine Intervention is going to destroy all creatures, so it'll solve that particular issue. It's going to destroy all gems, meaning that if you've got a bunch of simple supports down, that you're going to go ahead and pop all those. We have a ridiculous number of cards in the set that are going to make really, really a lot of gold tokens. We've actually got we got a fair amount of cards in Standard right now that make a bunch of gold tokens. I think they're all red though that make gold tokens, so you pair this with a white-red walker of some kind. But nonetheless, that'll make a whole bunch of Ox tokens. Furthermore, you're going to be getting Ox tokens equal to the reinforcements. So let's say that you Bovine Intervention and you make a bunch of Ox tokens, and then your opponent ramps up their board and you're like, oh gosh, I got to do this again. Well, when you do it again, you're going to get all of the Ox tokens that you destroy back, plus all the new things that you're going to be destroying because of how this card works, in that you're going to be getting the tokens equal to the number of cards destroyed this way, including their reinforcements. So you can run this with other token generators, you can do other stuff, and this just seems really, really great to me. We've also got a red little critter that's going to give all your Oxen double strike. I'm going to be covering that in my combos as well. But nonetheless, this card just seems like a card that I would want to use in a bunch of decks, so I like it a lot. In terms of like how high this is on the chase list for me, it doesn't destroy all supports, so this is more of like a 6 out of 10 for me. It would be higher, but we have some other white removal cards that you're going to see later in this video that rank higher. And so if they didn't exist, this would be like a 7 or 8 for me. But as it is, I think it's a 6 with upside. Any Flash, the veteran. This is 18 mana for a 4/5. It's got Flash, not a surprise given the name. And then when this creature enters the battlefield, you're going to return the first creature or support card with a mana cost of 10 or less from your graveyard to your hand, which is okay. And then that card gains full mana, which is great. And then when this creature attacks, you're going to exile the top 4 cards of your library and return the first 2 cards from your exile to your hand and give them half of their mana rounded down. So I really like this. This reminds me of Paco Taco, the old doggo that was in the Ikoria set, I think. But this here is going to just give us 2 free cards per turn and give them half their mana. And that is always a win. So this doesn't have a whole lot of power, being a 4 power creature for 18. So it's not strong on its own, but it definitely could be pretty good for hitting objectives. It is a rogue, that does make it an outlaw. So you will be able to use this for outlaw objectives or in outlaw decks. And those outlaw decks are definitely going to be thirsty for some outlaws. And this looks like it could be really good for enabling some of the outlaw pairings. So making sure that you're getting some of those other cards like Caught in the Crossfire. I would put that up on the screen, but we're going to be seeing that later in the video as well. Or some other thing. So there's just a lot of options for this card, and I like that it gives you options. The more options you have, the better. Oh, right. Where is this on my chase list? This one for me is also a 6. I don't think it's going to be like a top meta card, but if there's an event that wants us to be using Outlaws, then I will be using this in that event almost for sure if I have it. Assimilationegis. This is a 15 mana, 3 shield support. It is white and blue, and while the support is in play, the first creature your opponent controls is disabled. Then at the beginning of combat on your turn, you're going to gain control of the last opposing creature until the end of turn, and if it's disabled, you're going to enable it, and then that creature is going to gain haste. So this kind of reminds me of Suppression Bonds, which is a 6 mana support that's going to disable your opponent's first creature, but it also only has 1 shield, which is kind of generally the downside to those kinds of supports. Same deal with like Claustrophobia or something. But Assimilationegis has 3 shields. So this thing's going to be a lot more sticky than other cards like it. And then not only that, but it has additional utility in that it's going to be stealing your opponent's creature every turn if they have it, and it's going to give it haste, so it's going to ensure that it's going to be able to attack. So this card right here, I think, is going to be very useful. It has blue in the color identity, meaning that we can throw this in our blue decks, not just our white decks. And because it's going to disable things when you're first in the first slot, as long as you're able to stop your opponent from getting things onto the battlefield, it's going to stop enter the battlefield effects from triggering as well. So there's a lot that you can do with this. You can sacrifice the opponent's creature if you've got some kind of sacrifice effect during the attack phase. But all in all, this just seems like a solidly good card. This one's going to be a 7 for me, just because I still find that there are times where I'll use Suppression Bonds, and this just seems like a slightly higher cost, but slightly potentially better version of Suppression Bonds. So I like it. Caught in the Crossfire. I mentioned this just a little bit earlier. This card is a card that I got to spoil on my channel, which was very exciting. This is a 16 mana card. It's got Spree, meaning that when you match gems on your turn, your Spree counter is going to go up. And then at the end of your opponent's next turn, that Spree counter is going to reset. So as long as you're making multiple matches in a turn, either with gem conversion or with cascades, you're going to be able to get the most out of this card. So spree 1 is going to make it so that outlaw creatures you control get +X+0. All the X's here, by the way, are going to be the number of red gems that you've matched this turn. So that +X+0 is going to be permanent. If you've got a lot of red gem conversion in your deck, then you're going to be getting a huge boost to your creatures. Then the spree 2 is going to deal X damage to each creature without the outlaw subtype. So if you're running this in a deck, you're probably going to be running it in an outlaw deck. If you're not, you've done goof. So if your opponent is not running outlaws, then you're going to be able to wipe your opponent's board realistically if you're able to get enough red matches, which is going to be really nice. So not only are you going to be empowering your own creatures, but you're going to be wiping stuff from your opponent's side. And then spree 3, you're going to deal X damage to your opponent's planeswalker and destroy X non-red gems. All those X's are going to be equal to the number of red gems you've matched this turn. So not only are you going to give your outlaw creatures a power spike, you're going to potentially get rid of your opponent's stuff, and you're going to give yourself a whole bunch of extra mana. So Caught in the Crossfire, I could see being a really cool game ender, or even just like a tempo generator in an outlaw deck. So I'm really excited to try this one out. The 16 mana could wind up making this a little bit tricky to play with. And then because it only is for outlaws, it's definitely going to be more of a niche card. So this is another one that's like a 6 out of 10 for me. It's a card that I really want. It's a card that I think will play very well in events, because I think it'll be likely we'll get some kind of outlaw-based objective. And so I think this will be a really cool card. However, I also don't think it's going to be meta-defining. Next up, Drout the Flesh. This card is going to function very similarly to how it does in paper, which means it's going to be potentially really scary. This is 14 mana for a 2/3. It's got level. That's what this little symbol over here is. It's legendary. And when you cast a card, you're going to increase this card's level by 1. Then, if this card's level is 3 or greater, you're going to create a zombie rogue token. We don't know what that is. My guess is it's going to be a 2/1 or a 2/2. When a zombie creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature gets a permanent +X buff. X is the number of zombie creatures you control, including their reinforcements. So I'm already imagining a whole bunch of really terrifying scenarios with this card. Scenario 1 is you're playing it in a loop deck where you're going to be casting a whole bunch of cards, and then you're just going to wind up getting massive zombie tokens down. Yes, this is slightly more complicated than it would be to just play Tainted Adversary. However, you could run it with Tainted Adversary to make extra zombies, because Tainted Adversary is going to come out and then is going to make it so that the zombie tokens come down, and then when a zombie enters the battlefield, a la the Tainted Adversary, then that creature is going to get ridiculous stacking buffs, and you're going to need a lot less mana to kill your opponent than you would otherwise need. So Drout the Flesh, I think, is going to be a very powerful card. You're obviously going to need to get it to level 3, meaning it's going to need to be on the battlefield for a little bit. It does have a little bit of niche power, but I'm going to put it at a 7 out of 10 for me. I think there's definitely a lot of room for this card to be very powerful. When it boosts your zombie creatures when they enter the battlefield, that includes non-token zombies. So if you're running this with some other big ol' zombie that you're going to be bringing out into the battlefield, that thing is going to be getting boosted by the zombie rogue tokens that you're going to be making from this as well. So I think it's a pretty cool card. I think there's a lot of potential power hidden in here. Not so far under the surface. So yeah, I think 7 out of 10 is a pretty fair guesstimate for Geralf over there. Railway Brawler. This card is one that I'm very interested in. I'm going to need to play with it. I'm going to need to test it out. It's not one that stands out as being like OP or anything like that, but it does have some really interesting things to it. So it's 15 mana for a 5/5. It's got reach, so it's going to be blocking. It's got trample, and it's got plot 15. So if you have 15 mana in your hand and you exile this from your hand, it's going to gain the plot emblem, and then at the end of your turn, it's going to return to your hand with full mana. This thing has, when this creature enters the battlefield, if this card has the plotted emblem, I should say, then it's going to get a permanent +6/+6 boost. Furthermore, when a creature enters the battlefield under your control, any creature, that creature gets +X/+X, where X is that creature's power. So this is going to make it so that as you play creatures, they're just going to get stackingly stronger. Because let's say that you play a 5/5, right? Let's go ahead and take our ooze tokens or elementals from Colony Garden, right? The first one is going to enter the battlefield, and it's a 5/5. It's going to get +5/+5, making it a 10/10. The second one's going to come down, making it a 15/15, and then it's going to get an additional 15 power to jump to a 30-30. And as you can imagine, that's going to cause some really, really massive jumps in power. Furthermore, the Railway Brawler itself is a 5-5. This effect should take place for the Railway Brawler itself, meaning that it's going to be 15 mana for a 10-10 with Reach and Trample, which is very respectable. And if you do choose to plot it, then it's going to be coming in as an 11-11, which will double and become a 22-22. So with Trample and Reach. So that definitely gives you a really nice wall to block your opponent's stuff. And so I could see this being very powerful with tokens. I could see this being very powerful with a creature deck where you're able to just play a lot of creatures over and over again. I could just see this being potentially very powerful on its own, where you just play a few copies of it and it gets really, really thick and swole. So it doesn't have anything like Ward, Hexproof, Shield, anything like that. So it will be fairly susceptible to removal. And that is a problem, especially given that it also has Reach, which means that as your opponent gets thick creatures, they're going to wind up killing this thing. But nonetheless, I could see this being a very powerful card, and it's one that I'm excited to try out. It's another one of those cards that I'm putting in that 6 out of 10 range. When I say 6 out of 10, that doesn't mean that it's not worth chasing or like getting, I should say. But it's not one that I would invest a lot of resources into getting because it's not going to be a top meta card. That said, I do think it'll be really cool, and it'll be fun to play with. Next up on the list, Requisition Raid. Oh boy, this thing. This thing's a 15 mana. It's got Spree. So same thing as caught in the Crossfire. As you make your gem matches, your Spree counter is going to go up. This one has Spree 1, destroy each opposing support, including vanguards. Spree 2, destroy each opposing creature. To Spree 3, creatures you control get +3/+3. So this thing's going to be really easy to make happen, right? You're guaranteed going to be getting Spree 1. You're almost, like, not almost guaranteed, but you're often going to be able to get Spree 2, even if you're not running gem conversion. And the Spree 3 is just icing on the cake that you don't really need. This thing potentially just destroys everything your opponent controls and is kind of like a cheaper version of Ruinous Ultimatum that also has slight downside of not just guaranteed working. You have to have made 2 matches, but Ruinous Ultimatum is kind of the best removal card in the game. So this card here honestly stands out to me as a 10 out of 10. I really want this card. I think it's going to be an amazing removal card. It doesn't hurt your side of the battlefield at all, and it gets rid of everything your opponent controls. Everything. Tokens, non-tokens, simple things, vanguards, critters, doesn't matter. They're all gone, and your things are going to get stronger. So this card is this card is I think this is my biggest chase card in the Mythic range. There's another Mythic that's very similar to this, which is kind of surprising. It's also 15 mana. It also has Spree, and I think that it needs Spree 3 to destroy your opponent's creatures, but then it doesn't destroy their supports or anything. It just disables them for some reason. So yeah, this thing is just strictly better. Just strictly better. And it's from the same set, same color, same mana cost, same mechanic, and just better. So yeah, you want this card. Very much so. I think that Vraska is my last one. Yeah, it is. So Vraska the Silencer. This is a 4 mana 3/3. It's got Defender, First Strike, and Death Touch. Meaning that anything that this thing blocks basically is gonna die. It also has when an opposing creature dies, you're going to create a gold token, which is nice, but not essential. And it's also an assassin, which makes it an outlaw. So not only can we run this in outlaw objectives, we can run it in outlaw decks. There's a lot of outlaw synergy in the set, which is very cool. But this is also going to be a wall that just doesn't care at all about how powerful your opponent's creatures are. It's just going to block and kill them. Your opponent gets a Galta Atraxa loop going. Doesn't matter. This thing has First Strike, they don't. It's going to be doing its Death Touch and killing them before any trample damage would go through, and you're just going to get rid of that threat right there. Granted, a lot of those loops do run Void Rend, which would kill Vraska, but we can always hope that that's not the case and it's just some kind of Galta Tortoise loop or something. But either way, this provides you with absolutely fantastic defense, and so I really like that. It doesn't have a lot of power, it costs basically no mana at 4. So you're going to be able to cast this like no matter what, whenever you want. And so this just screams like great card to me, actually. This one here is going to be a 7 out of 10, maybe an 8 out of 10 for me, depending on objectives and events, where it's not like powerful in that it's going to just win you a game, but it's going to make it so you don't lose games. And if you don't lose games, you're going to win games. So yeah, I like this one too. That's it for all of my mythics. Let me know if I'm missing anything that you think is chase worthy, if I've overvalued or undervalued a card that is on this list. I'm really excited for all of them. I'm excited to have all these different new toys and all the new synergies that we're going to be seeing in the set. And so I don't know. There might be more. We'll see. We just have to test things out when they come out. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.